Well, welcome back, everybody, to another truly inspiring episode of Tech Whispers, the podcast where we explore the stories, the strategies, and the leadership philosophies of our industry's top leaders. I'm your host, Dan Roberts, and today I have the distinct privilege, the joy of celebrating and unpacking the story of Hall of Fame legend Adriana Karaboutis, or Andi, as those who know her well call her. This is going to be a special episode themed This Is Your Life, Andi Karaboutis, where we'll unpack the story, the journey, the incredible milestones that have defined Andi's career. A journey that spans 5 industries, multiple geographies, including international, and many transformational moments. Andi's story begins with a remarkable 21-year tenure in the rough and tumble automotive industry, at least it was at that time, where she honed her leadership and technical expertise at Ford and General Motors. From there, her path led her to Dell, where she played a key role in shaping the company's IT strategy during a pivotal and transformational time. She'll talk about that as being a time that really pushed her out of her comfort zone, where she definitely moved her cheese. But Andi didn't stop there. She brought her visionary leadership to Biogen, where she helped revolutionize the organization's digital capabilities in the highly regulated biotech industry. Then at National Grid, Andi took on the challenge of leading IT in a critical infrastructure space, navigating the complexities of energy and utility transformation. Andi continues her work today in a new chapter focused on corporate board service, where she is on the board of 4 public companies. And we will talk about all these things. So let's dive in and learn more about the incredible life and legacy of Andi Karaboutis, starting with the first of several incredible mystery questioners who know Andi very well, and I appreciate them helping us unpack her story.
Andi, I understand that you spent a number of years in manufacturing before taking on a director role in IT and integrating IT and the technology with the business. And I'm wondering how that blend of business and IT experience went on to shape your leadership style and the way you developed the talent that reported to you.
Oh my gosh, Dan, what a surprise. That's got to be Marv Adams, who was an incredible leader at Ford Motor Company and who I worked for as CIO. He's just amazing. He's moved on to some great business roles out in New York, financial services, et cetera. So what a blast from the past, I would say. So great to hear from him. So that is a great question, Marv. As you know, because you are always a leader that talked about people, process, technology, and culture, because you need to modify both, all of those, I would say, in order to really achieve transformation and improvements. So to have empathy and to really understand IT and technology's users, you walk a mile in their shoes. And so having had the opportunity at Ford to work in manufacturing and really walk the plants, talk to the people, be on the lines, do computer integrated manufacturing work, and then come and join IT and weave in and out, as Ford Motor Company actually gave us opportunities to do between business and technology. It just allowed me to do better knowledge elicitation, allowed me to be more empathetic, allowed me to really understand. We talk about user design and designing for end users, but when you have empathy, you can do that so much easier and better. And so it was phenomenal to be given that opportunity to actually work in manufacturing and then join IT.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marv. And people don't realize today how many amazing leaders came out of Ford, in our profession, especially, it's yourself, Ted Colbert, Jim Schofield, Keith Rowland, Vijay Sankar. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's just like, what was in the water back then, Marv, right? But it was intentional. I mean, you like you said, culture, people, development, it's a priority.
Dan, it was extremely intentional. I would say Ford was a model for that back then, because I remember being pulled and saying, hey, we think you have potential, but we need you to do 3 things. We're going to move you out of your home organization. We're going to move you out of your geography. And we're going to move you out of your leadership level, promote you at some point. However, we're not going to do all of that at once. So actually, Ford did an amazing thing. They sent me to Europe. So I lived in the UK, did cost estimating systems at that time, and got a promotion, but did not leave IT. And so always keeping a variable constant of the three was super important. And then when I came back from Europe, I left IT and went back into the business and supply chain. But the rigor, discipline, and planfulness with which they did that was, to me, world class. And I hope Ford Motor Company is continuing to do that sort of thing. But it was a very nice, true career development and progression. And Marv was at the center of that because he brought me back into IT after I had been in Europe and then had worked production control and supply chain.
Incredible. Well, thanks again, Marv. And Andi, as I put this together, it really became This Is Your Life, Andi Karaboutis episode. And it was just so fun to pull together. One of the things I kept hearing about you from people who know you well is, and it's the mark of great leaders, you run to the fire. That's been one of your things that really separates you as one of the best leaders. And this next mystery questioner, we spoke for about an hour. It was just such a joy. And the question's like 10 seconds, but he talked about you being just really ambitious, how you work fast. You like solving big problems. He knew that you were the person to put on a big, hairy problem. And you were very successful when it came to tackling new things, new ventures, figuring things out. And so, anyways, with incredible pride, he described you as a great success story. So listen in on this question and tell us who this is.
When you face a difficult situation in business or with the individuals involved, how do you handle it?
Oh my gosh, Ralph Segunda, the father of IT at General Motors, their first CIO. It's so great to hear your voice, Ralph. Matter of fact, it's so funny. He was emailing with him last night and never said a word. So you've done well here, Dan, finding some very key people. So dealing with difficult situations, Ralph, you taught me how to do that. So Ralph is the first CIO. I don't know if people know this at General Motors. So when I say he was the father of IT at GM, he was there for somewhere around 15 years and really, really consolidated and focused the organization. I consider my tenure at GM, starting working under Ralph, as the boot camp of IT. And I mean that in a very positive way. I came out stronger. I came out wiser. I came out humbler, I would say. And I thought I was pretty humble to start with. And I felt confident. I felt confident to continue my career. So facing difficult situations or difficult individuals, first of all, take the emotion out of it. And I'm Greek, Dan. So we come with a lot of emotion, right? My first language was Greek. I was, kind of sheltered upbringing and all the rest. But realizing that in tough situations and dealing with challenging individuals, you have to take the emotion out of it. You have to go back to what I said before to Mark's question, be empathetic and actually be able to walk in the other person's shoes and ask yourself, where are they coming from? You have to understand where you have shared goals and where you don't. Because sometimes when there's conflicting goals, those are the things to focus on and say, how do we get to win-win, on the shared goals? And you have to build the relationships and work through them. You also need to know when to escalate and to ask for help. And quite often people think, that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Knowing when to ask for help is a sign of strength. And so I would say facing difficult situations, those are the thing. And once you've synthesized all of that, be decisive, right? Make a decision on we're agreeing to disagree, or we need to go this way if it's, something that's in your purview for a decision, but always explain why. So those are kind of the key things. And it's not easy when you're in IT, as you know, Dan, to be able to, get to a good end goal when you've got conflicting objectives or goals and things that you need to align on. But Ralph was the master at teaching us how to do that, and he was also the master at how you could speak differently to different people. Some people respond to tough love. Some people need quiet conversation, very, maybe very thin skin. Some people, like myself, just give it to me straight, right? And Ralph was always knew, and I was so proud to work for him, who needed what.
Yeah, so good. Ralph, thank you again. He was just so excited to do this. He enjoys the continued relationship and collaboration with you. And he was telling me he can count more than 50 people who are now officers of companies or have gone to do board work. And again, part of that boot camp experience, right? And pretty darn special. So 55-year track record in our profession, Andy. Still going strong. He's so amazing.
He's the best. He's the best. Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. So, Andy, I've been in this profession like you a long time, a student of the profession, always big on relationships and the human side of the equation. And so I use that to tee up this next mystery questioner. Very good friend of mine, very good friend of yours. You're going to love hearing the voice. And you're going to love the question. So let's check it out.
Andy, during your time at GM, under Ralph Shigenda's leadership, you led 2 large global functions that delivered significant business results across global purchasing and supply chain and global manufacturing at a time in tech that very few women held such positions. How did your experience at GM shape your career as a powerhouse tech leader and board member?
Oh my gosh, Janine, we talked this week and you didn't tell me you were one of my mystery questionnaires.
Good job, Janine.
Janine Charlton, a dear, dear friend, and a very successful CIO in her own right, Merchants Fleet. So it's great to hear her voice again. And great to have you as a mystery questioner, Janine. Thank you. And thank you for that. And we were partners in crime, actually, at General Motors, because Janine at the time worked for HP, and she was a vendor partner. And we did a lot of things together to ensure success, both in global procurement and in manufacturing, in the 2 organizations that I led there. As I said before, how General Motors shaped my career under Ralph and, a super set of colleagues there was fundamentally teaching me how to take the hill and, how to actually do as some of the things I said before, which is shared objectives, understanding the goals, understanding what we're trying to achieve, clearly communicating. Details matter. And so folks at GM, the culture was such that it was important to keep the lines running, to keep the customer centricity high, quality high, et cetera. And so details mattered. And so that was, a key way that it shaped my career and success in keeping some of those things alive. There were also some procedural nuances at GM that were kind of important. So we had 2 processes, one called socialization, and I've never forgotten it. And again, it was a Ralph Shigenda special. And one was called corrective action. Socialization was about if you were going to take a decision as a key leader and you needed the support of the table around you, it was the onus was put on you to go talk to those people, either your peers, your customers, et cetera, internal customers, and the key constituents that needed to buy into the decisions and socialize and come back with their view, their opinion, where you agreed, et cetera. But it gave you an opportunity to actually put forth and have people understand what you're trying to do. And then we would come together. And one of the first things that was asked was, has this been socialized and where do we have agreements and disagreements? So what did that do? First of all, it forced leaders like myself to have key thinking, critical thinking. What am I trying to do and how do I communicate that? Too often we know what we're trying to do, but communication lacks. And so it forced that. It forced written communication. It forced getting to yes and great negotiation skills. And sometimes you didn't get to yes for good reason, but it did prepare you for that. And so by doing that, you actually, through the rest of my career, I was able to say, what am I trying to achieve? Who needs to agree? We call it racing now, right? Who needs to agree? Who just needs to be informed? How do I get agreement? And it's that clarity of thought of getting to the end point. The second process, and Janine knows this one well, and Dan, is corrective action. And corrective action is, we had a major outage, we had a major pivot point in a product or program. What happened? And quite often we say things, and I've heard, oh, well, we don't want to lay blame. Oh, we don't want to. Okay, but we do want to know what happened, right? You can call it root cause analysis, FMEA, 8D process. But unless you know what happens, you can't learn for the future. And so corrective action, all people that were involved came in, whether it was a vendor partner, our people on the ground, business people, quite often not following a process, would come in and we would find the root cause of a major issue. Those two processes, coupled with the culture I described before, Dan, really prepared me for clarity of thought, clarity of learning from failures and mistakes, et cetera, and holding people accountable. So you didn't, we weren't nasty to anyone, but we did want to get to the root cause so it didn't happen again. People then feel respected, a little uncomfortable at times, but knew that the outcome was, how do we make at that time, and I think it still holds true today, GM the best it can be.
That's amazing, Andy. You started off by talking about details matter. And, what you just helped us really get to is the right details, right? Because a lot of times in our profession, we focus on maybe more the technical aspects, the technical details, and we lose sight of the communication, the clarity of thinking. I think in the military calls it the corrective action. They call it the after action review, right? And it matters. That's where you learn. So I appreciate that. Words matter. And Janine, thanks so much for keeping it a secret. I know you talked to Andy a bunch, and Andy, wink, wink. But we're going to be featuring Janine this summer, so you know who I'm going to call for the first mystery question. So
Absolutely.
hopefully she figures between now and then. But
absolutely, that sounds great. She's
amazing.
wonderful. Thank you, Janine.
Yeah, for sure. One of your great superpowers is resiliency. And, this work is hard, right? Board work, those big operational roles. And those with the resiliency really, really stand out. So, I'd like to kind of unpack that, Andy, because I don't think it's one of those things you just flick a switch and voila, you got it, right? It's, can you think back to how did you build this muscle over time?
So resilience, or, the way I think most people define it is, bad things will happen. It's how you manage through them, right? So through a lot of experience and making a lot of mistakes, Dan, and coupled with wanting to get to results and do the right thing, right? Too often, and I see this in people, mistakes are made, problems come up, and they want to shy away from them. They want to move away. And you talked about me moving into the fire. It was because the way I was raised is, if there's a problem, it's there to be solved, right? I won't say problems are gifts, but they're there to be solved. And challenges are there to be pushed through. They're not to shy away from or run. Now, you may select to say, this isn't my problem to solve, but when things truly come into your environment, your landscape, and you have to solve them, it's resilience that will get you through. How do I fix this? How do I minimize the waste, the cost, the brand damage, the hurtfulness, whatever the outcome of a particular problem is? And so it becomes really important. It becomes part of the fabric of who you are and what you do. So I build resilience by recognizing, first, problems are going to happen. I'm prepared. Stay calm and figure out what is the best way through it. Who do you need to help you? How is the best way to do it? And so you kind of, you drive that. I follow a particular sort of cycle, right? I have my own little project management resilience kind of tool. And many who work for me, have heard this. It's the Sarah cycle, which stands for shock, anger, rejection, acceptance, and hope. So to be a resilient leader, and there's other little, formats, templates that people use that are simple, but to be a resilient leader, you need to know where your head is at. You need to know the problem and you need to know where your head is at on it. So something comes up. It could be a major outage. We just lost our networks, or the whole company went down, or there's a ransomware, touch wood as I say this. You're in shock. Get through it pretty quickly, but recognize where you are. Then you can move into anger, which is what happened? Who did this? Did someone do, et cetera? It's a natural human reaction. You try to move through that. Then rejection could set in that says this didn't really happen, or this can't be, or it must be something else, right? Usually that comes through when they say an IT person did something versus a business person. Right? Well, it couldn't be the IT person. We've all been in that scenario. Then you get to acceptance. And once you get to acceptance, you're solving problems, right? The faster you can get through shock, anger, and rejection, and get to acceptance and hope of a challenge or a problem. And by the way, this applies to major pivots in careers. It's not just problems in front of you, right? The healthier and the faster you can get to resolution. And I've seen people, and I've done it myself, where they'll loop between anger and rejection and be in this, but you got to break out of it. The key, back to your question, Dan, is fundamentally recognize where you are. Be self-aware and move yourself along, because 9 times out of 10, when you're in the roles that you and I have been in, and Janine, and these preeminent CIOs, people are watching you and they want your leadership, right? And to quote, I think it was Napoleon that said, as a leader, you fundamentally have to show where you are, have it be clear, and then bring hope. And so you've got to get through the Sarah cycle yourself, but give yourself the opportunity to know where you are. Sorry, very long-winded answer, but I feel passionately about
That is so good. That is so good. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard that model before, Andy, and just gives us both a mindset and kind of a toolkit to work through in those situations. So appreciate that. As you were talking, you made me think of great leaders are okay talking about failure. You've kind of alluded to it, right? That's when you've built those resilience muscles. So kind of want to put you on the spot. Is any, as you look back at some of those failures, any good failure stories where you really got some rich learnings, Andy, that you can share with us?
Boy, is that a fertile ground. That's a great, just so many to pick from. How much time do we have, Dan?
All you need, Andy.
So absolutely. And by the way, I spend time thinking about my failures and what I've learned, right? So I firmly believe that 80% of our wisdom and our learning comes from really looking at our failures. And actually, Michael Dell, in his latest book, had a phenomenal quote. He said, success, I'm going to get this wrong, but success is a function of how well you handle your failures and what you learn from them. And that is just so spot on. So failures, let's see, my GM days, our strategy was to go to fewer SAP instances, and I let Asia Pacific go off on their own. And I didn't tell my esteemed boss, Ralph Shigenda, who found out and said, when did you know? Why did you not come to me? And we had a very, very memorable meeting on that. And, my failure was around communication, engaging him earlier, et cetera. Now, ultimately, we got things back in line, but boy, it was food for thought and a lot of learnings out of that. Do you want more, Dan? Because I can just.
You get another one, yeah. There's so much to learn.
We had for the sake of innovation, when I was at Dell, which I know we're going to talk a bit about. I wanted to turn on Google search instead of having people go to static, website, the intranet and learn. Let's just put and create a Google search, let people search for the topic they want. It's great. It was, 10 years ago, that was like, so what they do at home, they can do in the company. I did get a little warning from a couple of folks that said, if we open this up, there may be documents that aren't locked down as they should be, and so proper access controls, etc. Fortunately, it wasn't completely detrimental, but people were able to search things like, how much does so-and-so make, and what, and we went back, locked it down, fixed, the permissions, if you will, etc. But in that zeal for, sort of moving ahead in innovation, that was another one. But eventually worked out.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Dell, because that's where I want to go. We've talked with Marvin Rowell. So that was your 21 years in the automotive industry, right? And then you took this big pivot, right? You went to Dell and became the CIO there eventually. What was going on at Dell in that time?
Wow, so much. So first off, I will say, spending 21 years at Ford and GM, comfort zone was the auto industry. Comfort zone was Detroit, though I had done, a stint in London. It was, Ford had nicely cocooned me out there, and it was a phenomenal experience. I was to the point my sons were going to university, and I thought to myself, I can either stay in my comfort zone and probably ride out my career, which, by the way, many, many people do and have phenomenal careers. Rob Carter is one who, I agree with you, is kind of the greatest of all time, and they've done extremely well. For me, there was something about I need to move out of my comfort zone if I'm going to keep learning and, get more out of the experiences, new geography, et cetera. Dell had called me a year before I actually made the move. And at that time, my youngest son was in high school and, just finishing, wasn't time, got the call again. And I decided to take the leap and go talk to them. It wasn't for the CIO role. As a matter of fact, they said to me, we don't know that you can be fast enough for this industry. The auto industry has a little bit different tack time than the tech industry. You guys have, 10-year, sort of product development life cycles. We don't. We have something much faster. So to me, that was challenge on. And they said, and I said, well, I'd love to be the CIO. And they said, yeah, we're not so sure. We don't know. Come over, try it first. So now it was moved to Texas, leave the auto industry, not going to get a promotion out of this, be the CIO, game on. And we're going to put you 2 in a box in a role. What's 2 in a box? Well, 2 in a box is there's the incumbent, and you're going to come in and learn. And she was wonderful, wonderful. It was Rhonda Gass, who's at, I believe, Stanley Black & Decker. And she's a wonderful person. And I said, okay, so I get there, and it was talk to people, go learn about the business. I said, well, I'm not just going to go rap on someone's door and talk to people when, it's a completely different culture, a culture of discovery, curiosity, not that GM and Ford weren't, but uber curiosity, working 2 in a box with someone, having to negotiate who's doing, et cetera. And so it moved my cheese. Dan, my cheese moved, right? And it was exactly what I needed. And I think more leaders should think about whether it's within their own company, right? You can stay within a company, have different experiences, Ford offered that, or moving completely into a different industry and trying to be successful. So I was there about 10 months in. The incumbent CIO was leaving. Several internal candidates interviewed, and I'm sure they had external candidates. And I was determined that I wanted that role. So I actually wrote a paper and thought, well, if I'm going to be the CIO at Dell, I've been here for 10 months, I'd better have an opinion, right? I'm not from the outside, though from the outside, you should have an opinion too. And so I had an amazing chief of staff. By the way, I believe everybody should have someone at work that can be your best friend, sort of helping you. An amazing chief of staff. I said, "I got to write this paper. I need to have an opinion. I need to write this up." And he said to me, "What is your opinion?" And so we started pulling together what I would do, with the install base, what I would do with our technical debt, what I would do with, we've got products that we're selling to CIOs that I should be showcasing as a CIO. So it was the sort of drink your own champagne. And so it was a rigorous process. And I was successful and became the CIO 10 months after being at Dell, which was a pivotal role for me. Be the CIO of a tech company. You get a lot of friends telling you what you're doing right or wrong.
Yeah, everyone's a CIO, and
Yeah.
I've never. That was brilliant. I mean, because when you have to write it, it really forces you to think, right?
Yes.
I
It
love
forces
that.
you to think about your strategy. It forces you to think about the constituents. And also, it's a bit of a brave pill because you're not going to write down what you think everyone wants to hear because you've now said, this is what you wanted. It's sort of a bill of sort of what you want to do. And so, but what it also did is it made the interviews flow well because I would send it to each interview 2 or 3 days ahead of time and say, this, you should have this. This is how I'm thinking. Right. And so, highly recommend that to anyone who's looking to go higher within their organization.
I've never heard of anybody doing that. That is just brilliant.
I don't think I've ever admitted it publicly, Dan, but here we have it.
Yeah, so good. As you were going through that conversation, you mentioned kind of the family life, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing it out of school, but having breakfast with our friend Janine recently, she goes, everyone knows Andi, the board leader, which we'll get to, the great C-level operational executive. Most people don't realize that she also at that same time raised 2 amazing young men. So good on you. Those sounds like those young men are doing really
Thank
well in the
you.
world.
They are actually my pride and joy. They're both very successful, great young men. And I did raise them for the most part alone. So, but they are my biggest joy and accomplishment. And I have 2 wonderful stepkids as well that I would be remiss if I didn't say are equally wonderful.
Awesome. I love that. Well, we're kind of in the Dell chapter, right? And so I've got 3 amazing people who have an inside look at the days of Dell when you were there. And so they're going to help us unpack some more of your leadership superpowers through that chapter. So let's listen to this first one, Andi. You're going to know who it is right away.
One of your superpowers is your ability to collaborate and build strong, trusting relationships with your stakeholders, a skill I witnessed firsthand during a large and complex transformation you were leading. How do you cultivate effective collaboration with other C-suite leaders, particularly the CEO and CFO, to ensure technology not only aligns with, but also drives broader business goals?
Is this my trusted and wonderful friend, Justin Menon?
It certainly is.
So I am Justin. I absolutely adore you. So he I actually was so proud of him, became the CIO of Shake Shack, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I will share something further. That trusted friend that helped me with putting together my thoughts in paper to become the CIO was none other than Justin Menon.
Wow. I had no idea. So this is just coincidental, Andi.
Yes. And Justin was incredible. Actually, something funny. We codenamed it Queso, which was the name of his dog, Project Queso. And after hours, I would say, here's what I'm thinking, Justin. Does it make sense? How would you? And he was that person that I credit for helping me with that paper. So much is coming out now. And to watch him now be a 2nd or 3rd time CIO is absolutely incredible. Justin, thank you so much for that question. So, fundamentally, to collaborate with other C-suite leaders, it goes back to understanding their goals, their priorities and challenges. And again, agreeing on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, figuring out where they are, and connecting to what's in it for them. So if you think about Simon Sinek, who says, connect to the why and explain it to people why you're asking them to do. If you're trying to really influence key leaders, bosses, and stakeholders, you have to find out where they are and connect to them and try to be able to talk in terms of, the things we're trying to do, how they would benefit their organizations, whether it's, at the time it was Brian Gladden, who was a wonderful CFO, or Michael Dell, or Jeff Clark, who was, our vice chairman, and very, very discerning on quality and specificity and why are you doing it, and clarity of thought. And so I think all of those things that I've managed before. And then there's some very pragmatic things. You've got to demonstrate you know how to manage cost, and you have to be able to demonstrate that you can manage risk. So if you're trying to collaborate and work, that's what you need to do, is those fundamental basics that you've thought 360 degrees around, the work you're trying to do that connects to that. The other thing is making sure that anything that you're doing, you can demonstrate it connects to the company's goals and objectives, right? So at the time when I was at Dell, it was a phenomenal period of time. Michael had decided to go from, PC hardware to services and solutions. I believe, and don't quote me, Dan, but I believe there was 18 acquisitions in 36 months, Compellent, Quest, Force 10 Networks, not quite EMC. EMC happened later, but the acquisitions came toward the goals of becoming a solutions company. And so recognizing that when you try to connect to the CFO or the vice chairman or the CEO, you have to recognize that's where we're going. How does what I'm trying to do connect, support, and deliver that? And so, you become that broad thinker. It can't be only technology. And by the way, I'll just foreshadow a few questions ahead that I think we're going to hopefully cover, Dan. It's that kind of thinking that affords you the opportunity to be on boards as well. Because you can't just be expert in your particular capability, whether it's IT or marketing or product development. You really have to understand the company and the direction of the company. And once you earn trust in doing that, that's when you've earned a seat at the table to, be able to sort of move your initiatives and things like that forward and gain the support that you want. And nobody knows that better than you, Justin.
So good. Can't wait to see what he does at Shake Shack. He's going to be awesome. And, and the queso, that's just really
Project Queso. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. So
you've mentioned Michael Dell a couple times, and I think he's one of the most interesting, successful, iconic business stories in our country. Really, I mean, from the dorm room to be able to remake himself all those times, grew the company to where it's at today. You were right there at the table with him. What's it like to work with Michael Dell? What's he like?
I think he's one of the most iconic in the world. If I could take what you said even further, Dan, he is incredible. So he is extremely pragmatic, unemotional, listens intently, and if I could say one superpower that I perceived in Michael Dell is he discerns the important from the other unimportant. He actually at one point said to me, Andi, we don't need to be world class in everything. We need to be world class in the important things. We need to be okay at some things. And there might be some things we really, don't have to worry about. And that to me was so insightful to, again, align priorities. What's super important? What do we need to do extremely well? Michael was maniacal about, and is, I would say, maniacal about his customers, customer satisfaction, getting the right product. And this started from he customized the PC to you, right? Let me send it to you the way you want it, not the way, for instance, IBM at the time wanted you to have it, sort of thing. And so that clarity was unbelievable. He also empowered and trusted and expected results from his team. Michael was on stage one time when we went through, by the way, let me back up and paint the scenario. So to go to be as the best solutions company, did these acquisitions, et cetera, he went private. It was the $24.9 billion deal where he went private, took his company private with Silver Lake. Very clear why. I need to move at pace. Sometimes when you're in the eyes of as a public, you can't move at the pace you need. Went private, intentional. He was on stage, and I think there were 60 or 80 leaders in the audience, and he was explaining, where he was taking the company. Someone asked the question, Michael, this is a huge change management initiative. How are we going to, change management office? I mean, I'm sort of improvising what I think people were thinking. Are we going to put these things in place? And Michael was standing on the left side of the stage, and he walked. He said, we're here today. And he walked over to the other side of the stage, and we need to be here. Start putting your plans together. So it was incredible because number one, he's talking to the leadership of the company. So not talking to junior people. Number two, very clear where we are and where we're going, right? Number three, very clear on you are the leadership. Good question, get to work and figure out that change management, right? And, not very clear on simplicity of, yes, there's a lot of complexity here, but that's where we need to go. And so that's what it was like, working in and around and ultimately for, Michael Dell. He was just incredible that way. He also stays out of the fray, which is something I really admire about him as a leader, right? He doesn't get into the mire of things of, I would even say political or, sort of, so he has been very, very consistent, though he's very active in, worrying about the world at large. He's regularly at Davos and things like that. So I have a lot of respect. I've spent a lot of time on it, but I think it's important because people see the persona, but he is, a bit of a WYSIWYG in some ways, but just very clear on what his priorities are, Dan.
I love it. I've only heard great things about him. Rob Carter, we chatted about Michael as well, and just, well, that's great. Well, and again, thank you, Justin. A couple more people from your Dell days kind of want to weigh in on your superpower. So this next one's a pretty heartfelt question. I'm going to break it into two parts because it's so meaty. So let's listen to the first one.
When Dan mentioned you were joining him on Tech Whisperers, I was giddy with excitement. You are my biggest role model, as you know, and inspiration, and the only reason I pursued a CIO role. I am forever blessed to have worked alongside you for 4.5 years at Dell and will always cherish our magical time together. Seeing you lead the largest transformation in Dell's history with grit and grace, as Dell was transforming from a hardware company to a software solutions company through organic and inorganic growth, truly shaped my entire career. You believed in me and saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And you empowered me to drive Dell's business transformation through disruptive technologies and challenging the status quo. Who specifically shaped your leadership principles, and what experiences have made you the most purposeful and authentic leaders I've ever worked with in 25 years?
Wow.
Oh my God. Is that Alvina? Is that
Indeed.
you, Alvina? You are the most incredible leader. I feel like I should say that about you. Oh my God. Thank you, Alvina. So that's Alvina Akhtar. I think Antar, sorry. People know her from Okta and she's moved on and she's just done some amazing things while also raising, a family and just been a 360-degree phenomenal leader. It's so great to hear your voice, Alvina. Thank you. Thank you. So who shaped me? So I'm going to start with, I think the earliest shaping I had was growing up, first generation US born in my family, first generation that not only went to college, but in the case of my parents, finished high school. So both my parents, one finished 3rd grade and 6th grade. And they came to the US, did not speak English. Were afraid to let my sister and I go outside because it was the fear of the unknown. And so I went to school my first day and didn't know a word of English. It was all Greek. Had some embarrassing moments. sort of not knowing how to ask for the ladies' room, if you will, or the little girls' room. And so what that taught me is persevere and move, just go and get things done. And, be as resilient as you can be, though I wouldn't have known what the word meant back then. The leadership that's influenced me to be authentic, as you call it, Alvina, and thank you for that, open, transparent, is simply because it's what I need and crave. And so where I have flourished the most and the best is where I've had great feedback. Ralph Shigenda, Marv Adams, some of the great leaders we just talked about, Michael Dell, Jeff Clark, et cetera. And, where I've had transparency. I'm a fundamental believer in feedback is a person's right, and leaders owe their people feedback. It's not nice to give, it's their right. When people come into an organization and, 99% of the time want to do the best they can, right, they get feedback. So my authenticity comes from, what do people need to know about themselves, about the org, about our objectives, and how are they going to perform the best if they have that complete picture, right? And so I built it along the way. I can't pick one person. I can't even, Alvina, say that I have a mentor. People say to me, I check my everyone was my mentor, because I looked to all of them to learn about the business and myself. And so I translated that forward because of my desire to have authenticity, connecting to why, understanding where I'm at. I did have a point in my career, and we've all had the failure, where I didn't get feedback. And then something happened, and I said, well, where did that come from? Right? And I said, that's as much a failure of the leadership as it is of me not asking for it, right? And so that's where the authenticity and the transparency and the communications come in. Dan, I don't know if you know, and I didn't do it when I was working with Alvina at Dell, but when I worked starting at Biogen, which was when I moved to Boston after Dell, and all through my 6 years at National Grid, I did what was called the Monday Minute. And no matter where I was, I would pick up my phone, no matter what I looked like, by the way, most people will tell you. And I did a 1 or 2 minute video about what happened last week and where we are, and congratulating any key launch or something like that. I think in my 6 years at National Grid, I may have missed 1 or 2 weeks. Even when I was on safari in Africa, I did that Monday Minute. And it was to stay connected and let people know that I'm there, they're there. There's layers, there's geographies that separate us from a day-to-day relationship, but I want you to know what's going on. Through COVID, someone suggested to me, I said, what's the pulse of the org? They're really down. People can't celebrate their kids' graduation from kindergarten or from high school, and they're really down. And so we asked everyone to send in the names of their children, who were and what they had done, or where they're graduating from, whether it was in England or in the US. And I did a 25-minute Monday Minute calling out. It was obviously 25 minutes. But it allowed the children of that person working at National Grid to hear their name on a video. And it was just so powerful. So staying connected, and back to Alvina's point of authenticity, transparency, connecting. Again, I crave it. Therefore, it's what I try to give.
Your personal story, with your parents mirrors Monica Caldas, who was on recently from Liberty Mutual and came from Portugal, didn't have any language skills, and like you, has that perseverance, that grit, right? Just no excuses, just get it done. And yeah, amazing stories. And Alvina, you are really special people, and I appreciate your question. And she had a second part too. And so, Alvina, what was your second question for Andi?
And then what can we all do to accelerate progress in inspiring our next generation of women and girls in tech?
It's a great question, Alvina, and you're an inspirational role model in doing that. Allyship, exposing, working with organizations like the MCWT, which hopefully we'll talk about in a little bit, Michigan Council for Women in Technology, to expose from a young girl age all the way up to women to technology, mathematics, etc. I think that is absolutely so important. And it's not just, robotics and AI. It's critical thinking and reasoning, which is part of philosophy. It's which leads you to problem solving. And when you can do problem, so it's exposing problem solving and, really giving that as a opportunity to young girls and women. And it's also having a conversation that says, just because something's hard doesn't mean you won't like it, right? And separating challenge from sense of accomplishment and pride and outcomes and successes. So, how many of us have daughters, and by the way, sons for that matter, that say, I hate math. It's so hard. Okay, acknowledge hard, but does that mean you don't like it? And all of a sudden, you've opened up a different lens. There's also allyship. Why can't someone, there's referrals and recommendations. Why couldn't someone do that role, right? Could you consider them for it? And really going to bat for women, for certain roles with the leadership that's hiring. So it's a combination of things, but I would say, and this may be a little controversial, I would say it's got to be a part of the fabric of what you do and who you are to really promote that and promote diversity within companies. I'm not a big proponent for diversity officers. That's the controversial part, Dan, because to me, it almost, we wait for a diversity officer to tell us, what to do and how to get diversity into IT or, engineering, et cetera. It's around councils and committees and groups coming together and becoming part of the fabric of the organization. And Alvina, I know you share that because I watched you promote, through word and through deed and through action, so many people deserving of roles. And you were just a role model to me.
Yeah, so good. Thanks, Alvina. And I was talking with Angela Yoakum recently, who was at Dell same time, and she said you were an early leader and pioneer at the T200, which is thriving today.
It is. It's gotten so big, and it was a tremendous organization. We have a Slack group and Slack channels that we talk through. And so they're doing different things like promoting women, celebrating women, right? That sort of thing. So it's fantastic. The T200 is a great organization.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one more of your disciples from Dell, who's gone on to have a great CIO career as well, Andy. So I think you can recognize this voice after about a half a second. So check it out.
Hi, Andy. You are a coach, a mentor, and a grower of talent. Just look at all of your disciples who have gone on to follow in your footsteps. You led your team and gave us opportunities that a lot of other CIOs would not have done. You trusted us, and we all grew as a result, and we're all extremely thankful. Was this something that was taught to you, or was this something you learned from a coach or mentor of yours?
Tim Dixon. Timmy, hope you're well. It's great to hear your voice. So it was probably taught to me by my team that actually convinced me they knew what they were doing. They had clarity of thought. They were innovators like you and the team that you built, at Dell and pulled together. And so once I had trust, and for me, some people start with trust until you lose it. Some people you have to build trust. For me, you have my trust, but there's a check but verify component to it. It's just so easy when you pick great talent to watch them go off and do tremendous things. So was it something that was taught to me? I think it was more instinctual. And when you collaborate and you actually, work and you see people giving results, you give them more to do and you encourage them to move on and to keep doing. And, Tim, your success as what did we call you? The positive disruptor, right? Of really pushing and having edginess was phenomenal. And obviously you've gone on, and I think you're on your third CIO career position, if I'm not mistaken. So congratulations to Tim for that.
Yeah, I've got another Tim story here in a minute to share, a Tim Andy story. But Tim went on to talk about how what he learned, one of the things he learned from you was you would never let anybody badmouth IT. You weren't a pushover, but you did it with tact and diplomacy and I'm just thinking of those crucial conversations you'd have in your career. Any of those that jump out? Any of those crucial conversations that stand out that you can share with us? Maybe bring us in the room when you were having it.
Absolutely. So Dan, I don't know about any particular one, but I will tell you just overall, and I'll try to think of a particular one here, but overall, I've often said this to my kids, and I believe it. If we're not proponents of our own home, if we're not proponents of our own organization, if we're not proponents of our own company, do you think the competition's going to be? Do you think the neighbors are going to be? So I take it as a pride. If I take a leadership role and lead an organization, I take it because I think that organization is or will be great or continue to be great, right? And so, you have to stand up for that organization. So one of the things that I do is from the start of my tenure in any role, I keep score of what we did, right? Take technical debt. I had the guy, Shannon Solon, phenomenal individual over at National Grid. Technical debt was up here. It went to here. Write that aside. Keep it there. We did this many innovations. We did this. We did this. Keep them. And it's not just for performance review time. It's for those moments when people say, and we've all heard this as CIOs, you cost too much, you're too slow, right? Unfortunately, some of those things haven't changed. Some has changed in this era of tech. And be able to pull those out and have them ready to be able to say, here's what we've done, here's what's happened, not defensively, but factually, right? And so between that and being able to communicate clearly what you're trying to do and speak the language of the company and the business, I would say, that's sort of what keeps you and allows you to continue to defend your organization. I struggle SG&A organizations, right? Sales, general, administrative, which are the sort of what people might say are a drain on the P&L, right? You have to work a little bit harder to show your value and demonstrate it. And so do it from the start and keep it going, right? So there is a particular with a very senior person at Dell who said, you guys are just not moving fast enough. Tell me what that means, right? So don't go on the defense. Tell me what that means. Well, I wanted, but didn't our plans that we agreed to say this date and this date and this date? So you got to stay on top of your project program management, stay on top of your commitments, right? And so when you thread the needle and you're able to do that, then you can defend with credibility. The flip side of that is call your shots when you blow it. And it goes back to Alvina's question of your authenticity and transparency. We blew the budget here. Here's why. Here's what we're going to do about it, right? Tim knows this, and I'll share it with you, Dan. I hate subjectivity, and I know sometimes things are subjective. But when I see a presentation that says, we did better, we improved this, we alleviated that, we avoided these costs, right? It's like, oink, 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 sorry. But it's sort of like, give me the numbers. Show me and so again, it goes back to clarity of thought, clarity of all of those things. And so they're super important. And Tim and Co., he developed a team. Tim, you'll remember this. He pulled together a team. They wanted to go do experimentation, innovation, et cetera. By the way, the Google search thing we talked about, we did through Tim's team, which ultimately worked very well. But to do that, you have to be very clear on. Here's where the risk is. Here's what I'm doing, et cetera. So I keep going back, Dan, to clarity of thought, clarity of communication, clarity of intent. So important. So important.
So many gold nuggets, and I appreciate this. I want to take a little detour from the career journey, and I want to go back to a special date and time. Your induction into the CIO Hall of Fame. I was there. It was special. Some of your fellow inductees were Jim Fowler, Gada Ejim, Sheila Jordan. It was just real. It was like, my only question that I was, what took so long? Why are these people already in the Hall of Fame? But that's beside the point. That was a special night, Andy. And when you start these careers, you probably don't imagine someday, right, that you'll be one of only a few people. But what was that night like when that happened? And when did you like it hit you that I'm in the Hall of Fame?
Dan, it was, so first of all, it was the award I never knew I wanted or sort of needed to round out and that recognition. And so when I got the call, okay, yeah. I mean, because there's along the way, top 100 and Orby and various things, which were all magical. But this one was one where I just sort of I was kind of busy. I was important, but it's great. Yeah, it's good. And when I got there and saw the composition of the people, right, who was there, and I read who had been, in the Hall of, all of a sudden I realized, just how important it was, at least to me. And so it was, I call it the award I never knew I wanted so badly, right? And it was just magical. It was absolutely magical. So, and I remember being there with you, and I remember Tim was there and a number of other people, and we shared, not copious amounts of champagne, but we did share champagne. And it was fantastic.
Well, let's also talk about when we were sharing champagne the night before the awards. We were down at Nelson's on the Pacific Ocean, about 80 people. Our friend Dave Best was throwing a great dinner for award inductees. And do you remember what Tim initiated that night?
It was my birthday.
It was your birthday.
That's right.
And he got the birthday song going, and you just went with it and had a blast with it. It was so fun.
I did have a blast. I think that night I told everyone I was 61, and I just, was sort of like, am I really doing that? And but it's all here. So it's part of my transparency, but I just went with it, and it was amazing. Yeah, that's right. I had forgotten about that, Dan. You did say you were going to remind me of something.
That was special. Yeah. My second memory from that event was I have this great honor of leading the leadership masterclass, 2.5 hours. And I get to kind of pick my faculty, who are all award winners, inductees. And I wanted you to be on the faculty. And they're like, you can't have Andi. She's on the big stage. And you can only do one or the other. I'm like, dang. And to my surprise, you came to the masterclass. You were in the front row. You were leaning in for 2.5 hours. Like, you didn't budge. Do you remember that? Like, that's like leader as learner extraordinaire.
I did. I do remember that. But there's so much to learn. And when you stop learning, you just literally, I feel like you wither. And right, it's why I'm on boards now. It's that next chapter of you've got to continue to learn. You've got to continue to be curious. And it's funny. But Rob Carter said this in his Tech Whisperers podcast, which I loved. He talked about wisdom, right? And so wisdom and learning different, but so important. So learning and experiences becomes wisdom, and that is so important. And so sitting through your masterclass, which by the way, fantastic, was about how do I absorb more so I can give, so I can, have wisdom to share with others. And when you stop doing that, you wither and it becomes a little selfish too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great stuff. Good times. And that's a good point for us, Andy, to talk about Tech for Good, right? The scholarship, because it's all about learning, teaching the next generation. As you know, we do that by really investing into our STEM nonprofits here. And so I think we're up to about $400,000 that we've made in commitments to STEM nonprofits. And they get to send somebody through our 9-month IT leadership program. So you do so much in the community you have over the years. Is there some organization that you'd like to gift that to?
Absolutely. So first, Dan, I am going to start with kudos to you. Phenomenal thing that you do. And I am just so pleased and privileged to know that I can at least direct some of it to an organization that I absolutely love. I was the president of from 2008 to 2010, Michigan Council for Women in Technology. And it does K through 12 programs, igniting sort of STEM interest, technology interest in young people through 12th grade, and also for women, further on, mentoring, et cetera. They're a phenomenal organization. So thank you for the privilege of being able to direct some of that to the MCWT.
Well, you'll not be surprised, Andy, but they have been a multi-time recipient of that award because talk about an organization making real impact, like doing real important work. And so thank you for that. I'm really glad to hear that. Well, they know how to leverage that scholarship and maximize that. So fantastic.
Excellent. Good.
Well, I got a little more work for you, Andy.
Sure.
I want to get into this chapter, this season of your life. We've kind of unpacked a lot of your operational roles. I'm going to leave Biogen and National Grid for another day, but I want to kind of get into this next chapter. You don't call it retirement, you call it something else. And we're going to figure out why that is. So talk about what you're doing now. What's what's keeping you excited and busy?
So happy to. So as I said today, I'm on 4 public company boards. I'm on the board of ANN, which is a professional services insurance reinsurance. I'm on the board of Autoleaf, which is largest safety supplier company in the world, airbags, steering wheels, et cetera. And funny story there, one of my first roles at Ford was programming the VIN and the airbag serial numbers to come together, and Autoleaf was one of the customers. So I feel like I've done a full circle. I'm on the board of Savills, which is a professional services property real estate company. It does consulting globally, and it's headquartered out of London. And I'm on the board of Perigo, which is a phenomenal consumer healthcare company domiciled in Dublin, but with big headquarters in Western Michigan. I also am on an advisory for iGreentree, which is an AI company that does some amazing integration work around in the energy utility telecommunications space. And that really helps me hone my artificial intelligence, sort of thoughts, opinions, et cetera, and work with that company, which is amazing. So, and I've got some little nits and gnats, my give backs and that. And I now play tennis, Dan. So I'm sure you were just waiting with bated breath for that one.
Well, it's funny. We started this process and we were ready to record 2 months ago. And you sent me your schedule, like literally from Dubai to Dublin to the West Coast to here and there. I was like, there was no time. Your board stuff is so interesting and full. You call this rewirement, not retirement. And I can see why.
I do. I call it rewire. And I can't take credit for it. I heard that somewhere, but it fit perfectly. Because it fits with operational roles are a great legacy for me. But now being able to shape and help companies with sort of digital tech, AI as a capability, but applying governance and helping companies, maneuver and navigate to achieve, what they need to from a governance and overarching perspective. It's a very different role, Dan. And it's a very different approach, but it's a new muscle that I actually started building 10 years ago when I was asked to be on my first board, which was Advanced Auto Parts. And that's something that I want to encourage all of your listeners. You don't just flip a switch for the next chapter in your careers. You absolutely have to be planful and mindful. And I knew that I really enjoyed sort of the strategic thinking, the governance, the, risk management aspects of, the work that I'd done, and, research. I knew I wanted to be on boards, right? Didn't expect to have gone through and be so lucky. And I'm honored and flattered to be on the boards on, the ones that I'm on, but it was
Good
planful.
I happen to know one of the incredibly impressive executives in one of those companies that you're on the board of. And she was kind enough to provide a mystery question. And I'm going to tee it up first by saying her question makes me think of what you have in common with Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs had this great quote. He said, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains." And you've shared in a very tangible way that clean, clear, detailed thinking and where that came from. So check this out. You know who this is right away, Andi, and tell us who this is, and has fun with her question.
Andi, one of your superpowers is making the complex be simple. How do you teach others how to do the same?
Oh my gosh, that is none other but Mindy Simon, who is not just the CIO, she's the Chief Operating Officer at Aon. Incredible individual and talent, and just such a collaborative person. It's great to hear your voice, Mindy, and thank you. So how do you make things clear and simple? By the way, when you said something I have in common with Steve Jobs, I was thinking turtlenex or something. I wasn't sure where you were going with that, Dan. But I'm honored to have to share that. But Mindy knows that, and I often say this in a deprecating sort of manner, I'm not the smartest person in the room. So you have to really make it simple for me, right? This goes back to the way I sort of ingest. I believe others need to. So tech is jargonful, and tech is complex, has many layers. And if we talk, sort of belly button out, if you will, on what we know, that people won't understand, you won't get partnership, collaboration, funds, et cetera. So you have to think of, I think of analogies. I think of comparisons to people that, I often describe defense in depth and cybersecurity as a house with a lock, with a safe under a board to show there's multiple layers. People can visualize that. They need to see that. And so when they can connect to something that's known for them and something that is commonplace, all of a sudden you've won the battle of clarity. I might have said this before, Dan, but I always told my teams, could you start me at the forest and then take me to photosynthesis, right? Because when you start me in this service-oriented architecture or this hypervisor, like, what's the program? How does it, so tell me where we're starting. How does it connect? It's the Simon Sinek, as we said before. How do we connect to the overarching picture? And then you can take me down step by step. So I understand this thing at, the nth degree of depth, how it relates to the overarching goals and objectives of the company. So that clarity and simplifying comes from, again, my own need for that, and recognizing and having empathy for somebody who doesn't have the capabilities in my sphere. Yeah, Dan, I'll give you and Mindy one other example. I was presenting to my board at National Grid, and this isn't confidential, this particular example, so I'm happy to share it. It was a digital discussion, and one of the board members said, "What do you mean you're going to personalize and customize?" I thought we were trying to standardize, right? Because they astutely heard standardization. And right away, I drew a parallel for them that said, think of your phone. If it's let's say you have an iPhone, it's got the same operating system, the same look and feel, the same buttons, the same way you invoke an app. But all the apps that you have in your phone are not the same as the apps the next person has. So there's this standardization and this customization. had the whole board with me at that point. So you have to think in those terms. But anyway, long-winded answer to a wonderful person, because Mindy is actually the epitome of being able to do this. So we have a mutual admiration society in that regard, Mindy.
She's amazing. We are going to be doing a podcast later. I'm going to be calling you, Andi, for a mystery question. And I think it was like she was in another country. She was in a taxi or an Uber. It was like 5 a.m. That's why her voice is kind of crackly, but she wanted to get this done for you. So I appreciate her, but so good.
You're wonderful, Mindy.
Yeah.
She's also T200 and just gives back and takes time for people. She's amazing.
And, I think that was lesson number 327 you've shared with us today, Andi. It's such a good lesson for our people in our profession. Start in the forest. Start at the forest level. Work to photosynthesis, right? Especially if you're speaking to your board, your C-suite, business partners. Such a good nugget.
Dan, if you ask people, why are we doing this? There's all of a sudden, if they haven't thought through to the forest, there's these layers of questions. Well, we have to do this. Why? Right. And we've had these conversations. People that are really astute will then go back and follow that the first time they come in for a presentation or to sell something, if you will.
Well, if they're smart, they're going to write queso now. They're going to write their point of view before they go into that meeting.
Justin's going to love me for putting queso on the map.
So good. So good. Well, Andi, this has been just a gift. I'm going to go back probably this weekend and listen to this again. This is so darn good. I'm going to go back and take some more notes, but thank you so much for being so generous with your time here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to share with your viewership, Dan. So I really, really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who asked those mystery questions. Great questions and super to hear their voices.
Yeah, they were all excited to do it. Thank you. And, everyone knows that a week from now on CIO.com, Andi and I are going to do an article together. We're going to dive into some additional topics. So a couple of those are going to be around, Andi, you as a trailblazer, especially for women back in the 90s, early 2000s, the automotive space, which was fascinating. What's it take to be a modern CIO in the age of AI? And you being on the board of AI and on boards, you have a great point of view there. You alluded a little bit to in the podcast, but the whole idea of self-awareness, know thyself in the power of the core, right? And you are just so good at that. And then if time allows, you did a presentation in Greece recently that you shared. It was kind of like a master class. It was like the skills to be successful today. And I want to unpack that too. But so with that, I'll give our audience the best. And Andi, I think this next chapter for you is going to be your best work yet.
Thank you, Dan. So appreciate it. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
And with that, we'll leave it there. We'll see you all next time. Thanks so much.